Raheem Morris's poor clock management just cost the Falcons their playoff hopes.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, been covering the Atlanta Falcons for nearly 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still being strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that goes strong with me as everydayers. And to become an everydayer, all you have to do is make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And you can do that by subscribing or following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So we are rapid reacting to the Falcons' disappointing, heartbreaking 30-24 loss to the Washington Commanders in Week 17, potentially costing the Falcons their playoff hopes. You know, they still got a shot if they can, win next week and hope Tampa Bay chokes against the New Orleans Saints. But a heartbreaking overtime loss, a very winnable game for the Atlanta Falcons. By no means a perfect performance by them, but it did feel like they had an opportunity to win this game. And when you look at the reasons why they didn't win this game, it isn't all on the coaching because, players needed to perform better on the football field on both sides of the ball. But you really look at the coaching and you circle Raheem Morris and his poor clock management at the end of the first half and then at the end of regulation before going into overtime as two really glaring issues on this team. And it's unfortunate because it's, potentially what cost the season, right? We've been pushing Penix as this or pumping Penix as this, savior and whatnot. And we'll talk later about, his performance and whatnot, but wasn't perfect, but there was an opportunity for him to save the season. And, we're looking more at Raheem for why the season was not saved. And so, for those of you that missed it, basically at the end of the first half, the Falcons had all 3 of their timeouts and they were driving down the field and they did not use any of those timeouts, especially after I forgot who caught the ball. But they had let me look it up. I don't remember. But yeah. So I don't remember who someone caught a pass and the Falcons had a chance to use a timeout and save 20 seconds. And instead of it was Darnell Mooney. That's who it was. I'm sorry. Mooney caught a 12-yard pass or something, and they could have saved time, another potentially upwards of 20 seconds. They did not. They didn't call a timeout. So that forced them to have to throw a quick pass to a 3-yard pass to Kyle Pitts to stop the clock, right? With like 16 seconds left. And so at that point, they really only had 2 more plays to score, to attempt to score before halftime. And if they had, used one of those timeouts, they potentially would have stopped the clock with, let's say, 36 seconds instead of 16 seconds after that Pitts pass. And, potentially been able to run 5 or 6 plays that would have allowed you, potentially to score in those final 30 seconds. And then at the end of regulation, they had 2 timeouts. They could have used one of them to save like 16 seconds there at the end of the game and potentially run like 2 more plays with those 16 seconds and save time. And instead of having to settle for a 56-yard field goal attempt to try to win the game from, replacement kicker Riley Patterson, which was short, maybe like 5 yards short, that if you had gotten 5 more yards on any of the 2 plays that you would have ran, potentially 10 yards, that kick is probably good and you win the game. And so the question, of course, is why was Raheem Morris hoarding timeouts? And he said after the game, the quotes were, along the lines of, hindsight tells us we could have done it. And I thought the operation would be faster, meaning that they would be able to hurry up and get to the line. But it's like, you have a rookie quarterback, my guy. Like, this is not Kirk Cousins at the end of, the Tampa Bay game, clocking it with 12 seconds. This is not a guy that has that type of time in the offense with the operation. And so you got to help your young quarterback out. And so Raheem, I can understand why you thought the operation would be faster, but that's not a legit excuse in my humble opinion. And so, it'd be different if they had just one timeout in either one of those situations. But, when you have 3 and 2, you have time and money to burn, so to speak. So I'm never one of these people that sits here and kills coaches for poor clock management, that thinks this stuff is like, oh, you got to fire the coach because of poor clock management. It's not the first time that Raheem has messed up when it comes to clock management this season. So it's not an isolated incident, but I tend to look at them more as isolated incidents because they don't necessarily bleed into, games like, poor tackling or, having an inaccurate quarterback or those types of things that tend to carry over into multiple games. It's just like, oh, here's a game here. Here's a game like 6 weeks later. Here's a game 9 weeks later where, these issues spring up. And so they happen to every coach. And your job as a head coach is to minimize that. And, I think I understand. My belief is generally that I think fans tend to overreact to the poor clock management stuff because it's, for a variety of reasons. It's one of those things that I think a lot of fans, it's probably the one element of coaching that most fans can wrap their heads around. And so it's kind of unforgivable when a professional, does a poor job of it. But I certainly think Raheem deserves a ton of criticism for it. And it's a huge reason why this team lost the game. It's not the only reason, but it's arguably the biggest one. And because you're the head coach, you deservedly are going to take a lot of heat for it. And so the Falcons are going to have to figure out something. They're going to have to relook at their protocols. They have a game management coach in Tim Burbank. And so, Timmy, I don't know what you were doing in that situation. If you were giving the advice to, call the timeouts or not give it, but they got to figure something out. So we'll see how, Raheem responds to it. And if the problem, it's probably not going to say go away in the sense it's never going to happen again, because it tends to happen to every coach every now and then. But we'll see if it happens, if the next time it happens is like, week 15 of next year, or what I'm saying. So we'll see about that. But, talking about the other reasons, in addition to Raheem Morris's poor clock management that you lost, the other reason that you lost was Jayden Daniels' legs killed you. And to me, this is also part of the coaching issue, because at least from my eyes watching the live game, and we'll see what the All-22 says, I don't think the Falcons were spying Jayden Daniels really at all in this game. Like, most of the replays where Jayden Daniels was scrambling, there was nobody spying him in those situations. He finished this game with 128 yards on 15 carries. We're not counting the kneel down. 25 of those yards came on like basically one play in the first half, 61 then in the rushing yards in the second half, and then 42 in overtime. And he was able to burn them multiple times with his legs, even when he was throwing the football. Like, his first touchdown pass on the opening drive was an instance where it was a read option keeper, and he sort of got outside the pocket. Jesse Bates was working as a safety, sort of tried to chase him down, and that left, Olamide Zaccheaus wide open in the end zone, where, Jesse Bates got caught cheating, basically. And there were multiple 3rd and 4th downs in this game where Jayden Daniels was just basically able to just tuck it and run it. And, for me, like, it was one of those things where we knew that Jayden Daniels' legs was going to be a challenge. We knew that the Falcons have struggled to handle that type of challenge all year long. But it felt like, to me, Washington figured out midway through the game, like, oh, they don't really have a plan to stop Jayden Daniels. And if the first read is not there, and, we'll talk later about, his first read being Terry McLaurin not being there, just basically at that point, it was like, okay, throw it to Olamide Zaccheaus, or just run it. And he elected to run it a bunch, and the Falcons really had no answer for it. And so I'm not going to be too critical of Jimmy Lake, at least right now, until I see what the film says and what it looks like on the All-22. But again, looking at just the live replays when they did show it live on the broadcast, it didn't look like anybody had that responsibility to spy Jayden Daniels. And again, it would have been different if, they did have a spy and he was outrunning those angles, and we'd just be like, oh, well, we just need to get better players, which the Falcons do need to get better players on defense. That's going to be a priority this offseason. But, to me, if you're not spying him, even if we don't really have a guy that can spy him, you got to throw somebody out there. Like, the solution to that problem is like, oh, we don't have someone who can spy Jayden Daniels. So the solution isn't don't spy Jayden Daniels. It's just, hey, someone's got to do it, and we would understand if that player wasn't up to task. But to basically go with what it seemed like with nobody doing it, was like, to me is coaching negligence. So not going to go too hard on Jimmy Lake until I see the all 22, but sort of my initial view is that they didn't really have a plan for Jayden Daniels' legs. And we've seen too many instances, with the theme of this coaching staff, where the very obvious player that you need to have a plan for, this happened in week 1 against TJ Watt, and now it happened again, and seemingly with Jayden Daniels, like, you didn't have a plan for that, and so that's very frustrating with this coaching staff. And so, they're gonna again deservedly take a lot of heat on that. So we'll see, what the film says and whatnot. But like, ultimately, I don't think this game boiled down to they lost because of coaching, but like, it's hard. It's hard. Like, if someone says they lost only because of coaching, like, it's not the only reason they lost, but it's like probably the biggest reason why they lost this game. But they didn't lose this game because of their young quarterback, although at points in this game, the bright lights seemed a little too bright for Michael Penix. But then, he had that I don't know, dark vision. I don't know what I'm talking about, guys. The lights dimmed basically at a certain point, and he came through in the clutch. And we'll talk about Michael Penix's performance in his second NFL start as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So you guys know that Locked On has been very good to me, and I've got a little bit more money in my pocket, and I want to be smarter with my money now, not be as frivolous with my spending. That's why I have Rocket Money to help monitor my spending. Rocket Money is a perfect personal finance app that is going to not only help me monitor my spending, but they also can help find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions and help lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. It's going to bring everything together in one place, whether it's those subscription spending habits or even the goals that you want to hit this year, especially with New Year's resolutions. Great goals to have. And Rocket Money has helped over 5 million users and have saved them a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. And canceling the subscriptions is always the big selling point with Rocket Money. And you find out, how quickly $740 adds up when you're finding $5 here and $8 here and $20 here. It's going to really add up. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So talking about Michael Penix in his second start, it was an up and down performance. You see good, you see bad. I'll let the rest of you, go at each other arguing about the quarterback. I know that's you guys' favorite thing is to get online on your preferred social media platform and yell at each other, yell at strangers about slightly different opinions about the quarterback. So I'll let you guys do that. But, because I have a microphone and I'll share my thoughts on the quarterback, and then you guys can yell at me in the comments, which I will ignore. But, I think there was good and bad from Michael Penix in this game, right? I think the main thing that you would say from the good standpoint was the poise, right? That when you had those gotta have it plays at the end of the game on 4th downs, late in the game, 4th and 11 to Drake London, 4th and 13 on the game tying touchdown to Kyle Pitts, you had it, right? You gotta have it. We got it. So that shows, something about Michael Penix and sort of that sort of clutch factor when you needed him to make the big time throws to help you win the game. He made the big time throws. The problem with Penix, you saw also the bad, because it was a lot more inconsistent this week than it was the previous week. You saw more sporadic accuracy. You saw some concerns with ball security, right? Now he was missing throws all over the place. Like, you can find throws down the field, to the left side, over the middle, to the right side, but it did feel like a lot of his misses were on the right side. Anytime he was trying to throw a crosser across his body to the right side of the field, he's tended to spray those footballs. And that goes back to a conversation we've been having since we drafted Michael Penix, that the biggest knock on Michael Penix coming out of Washington was his inconsistent accuracy, his tendency to spray footballs. And that was something that, to me, with sitting him for, potentially 2 years, you would hope that that problem could get addressed, mostly because to me, the issues with the accuracy was mostly related to poor lower body mechanics, that his footwork tended to be very erratic. And that leads to inconsistency throwing the football when you don't throw from a consistent platform. And so, again, that will be something that we'll look back at the film to see if that was a contributing factor to some of those missed throws. Was it the spotty mechanics in footwork or not, whatnot? There was a couple of times last week against the Giants where he did miss a throw or two due to, some poor footwork or whatever, but it was like 2 times. And it felt like, again, I'd have to go back and rewatch the game, but it did feel like there were probably like 6 to 8 throws in this game where Penix missed that, you want your quarterback to hit those throws. I think he only completed about 54% of his passes. I think it was like 19 for 35. So, obviously he had more than 6 to 8 incompletions, but it did feel like of those like 16 incompletions, at least half of them were quarterback error, not necessarily receiver error. The other issue was the 2 fumbles. Now they didn't lose either of them. And that's the good thing about the Falcons is the quarterback has fumbled a lot this year. Kirk Cousins fumbled a heck of a lot. And fortunately for the Falcons usually fell on those. And Penix had 2 fumbles tonight. And it's like, I thought this problem was going to go with Kirk Cousins. And so it's like, and I just know, because there was a lot of discourse online leading up to this game about, how would Penix be affected by the wet conditions with the rain and the wind and whatnot. And people were like, oh, it's going to be a non-issue because he played at University of Washington and he has big hands and all this stuff. And it's like, well, again, he did all those things, but the ball security was not great. And we were hoping that that was going to be a problem that wouldn't rear its ugly head once Kirk Cousins was on the bench, and it reared its ugly head tonight. So those are kind of the concerns. And again, we'll see what the film says. The interception he had in the opening drive was a miscommunication. So not going to put too much blame on him for that. That was Chris Blair running a vertical route. And when Penix thought he was going to run an out pattern, and I don't think we saw Chris Blair after that point in the game. He got the hook after that point. But let's talk about the Penix pulse meter, which is our, sort of temporary replacement for the Kirk Cousins chaos meter that we came up with last week. And again, still work in progress. We'll see what we have how we'll modify things in 2025. But we'll just go with this for at least the remainder of 2024. And, the 5 different levels, like the Kirk Cousins chaos meter, based off of, Penix's pulse. Level 1 is the lowest, which is the pulse is barely there. Level 2 is a steady pulse. Level 3 is the pulse is, thriving. That's the adrenaline. That's where, he's doing great things. That's, level 3 is basically the best version. Level 4, replacing the Kirk Cousins chaos is cardiac arrest for Michael Penix, where the pulse is too fast. And, we got to take him to the hospital and solve this problem. And then level 5 is there's no pulse. He's DOA. And so to me, this was, again, it was kind of all over the place. Cause like there were times where it was like level 1 and level 2 and level 3 and level 4, so I'm going to go with a level 2 for Penix pulse meter. Again, the pulse meter does not work nearly as much with Michael Penix as the chaos meter was just perfect for Kirk Cousins. So we'll continue to workshop that. Maybe we got to do the Penix pump meter, right? And pull it, Key and Peele, 3 pumps is too much. That 3 pumps is bad, 2 pumps is just right. So I guess this was a 1 pump game is sort of where I'm at with Penix if we're changing from the pulse meter to the pump meter. But he did come back down a little bit to earth this week, which isn't a huge surprise. So I think there's still plenty of reasons to be, pumping Penix in a positive way. And we'll go through the film to see exactly what those reasons are. I did a full hour breakdown of like 25 plays from Penix on the extended all 22 review from last week against the Giants. And that's available for the Locked On Falcons insiders. If you want to become a Locked On Falcons insider, the link is in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. And so if you want to get in on probably what will be at least probably an hour and a half, since we may have like 40 plays to go, upwards of 40 plays to go through this week on this Commanders, might as well hit that link in the description, sign up to become a Locked On Falcons insider, get, into the queue to get that extended all 22 review. It's free. right? You sign up today, you get a 14-day free trial. So you'll get not only, this week's action, you can go back and watch the Giants game and watch the next Panthers game for free. And then you can decide, in the offseason, if you want to keep this thing going for $4.99 a month thereafter. So usually wait till the middle of the week to plug the extended all 22 review and the Locked On Falcons insiders, but I think worthwhile to sign up today to get ahead of that. So it wasn't just coaching. It wasn't just Michael Penix that stood out in this game. There were other things that stood out in this game, including Scary Terry not being so scary. All thanks to AJ Terrell. We'll talk about that as well as other tidbits and observations from this game to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So AJ Terrell seemingly shut down Terry McLaurin, right? Saw a stat from AtlantaFalcons.com, Will McFadden, that he posted on Twitter after the game, and the stat comes from Next Gen Stats, where AJ Terrell covered Terry McLaurin on 94% of his routes in this game, allowed just one catch on for 5 yards on 7 targets, and AJ also pressed Terry McLaurin on 44% of those, routes and coverage routes. And we wondered going into this week, would the Falcons fully allow AJ to shadow Terry McLaurin? Because last week they did allow him to shadow Malik Neighbors a little bit on like third downs and whatnot, but not every single snap. And so you wondered, or we're going to need him to shadow Terry McLaurin on every single snap this week if we're going to take Terry McLaurin out of the game. And they did that, and he took Terry McLaurin out of the game. Now, unfortunately, Olamide Zaccheaus stepped up in Terry McLaurin's absence. Not a great night for D. Alford. OZ beat him a couple of times. Jamison Crowder beat Alford a couple of times. Zach Ertz beat him on the game-winning touchdown in overtime. I noted at least 3 missed tackles for D. Alford alone in this game, just in my notes. And I'm sure that number might go up, as we watch more film. But overall, it was a poor tackling night for the Falcons defense. And that contributed to some of Jayden Daniels' success, as well as Olamide Zaccheaus and other players' success. The one positive you would say about the defense was the pass rush. Had another nice night, multiple sacks in this game, a lot of them coming early in the game, seemingly because the Washington offense was paying so much attention to Caden Ellis. Right, there was an interception for Caden Ellis in this game early on, where they sort of showed pressure, and they thought they slid their protection to Caden Ellis' side, and they brought J.D. Bertrand blitzing from the opposite side, and he was able to get free pressure. Caden Ellis dropped into the throwing lane. Jayden Daniels didn't see him, got the interception. You also had a Matt Judon sack. That was mostly owed to Caden Ellis drawing in the protection from the offensive tackle, who was more worried about Caden Ellis and not wanting to leave his running back on an island against Caden Ellis, which, so many teams have paid for. And that allowed Matthew Judon to sort of come free off the edge and get a sack on Jayden Daniels. And, speaking of the pass rush, got to talk about D'Angelo Malone. We gave him some love this week on the pod, and then he completely, ruined it with an illegal contact penalty on the opening drive of the third quarter. That was a backbreaker for the Falcons. Penalties were a big issue. I think Washington had like 15 penalties in this game, and several of them being very favorable to the Atlanta Falcons. But the Falcons had a few penalties in this game, and this one in particular was very unfavorable for the Falcons in this one with the D'Angelo Malone, where basically the Falcons were forcing Washington to punt on a 4-and-out to start the second half, and they got an illegal contact penalty, and that gifted Washington a first down, and they proceeded to march down the field. They converted, I think, 3 third downs after that point, a 4th down as well on a 15-play scoring drive after that Malone penalty. So, D'Angelo Malone, you had a week of shine, so at least you had that. So, and the same thing would go for Kyle Pitts, right? Kyle Pitts caught the game-tying touchdown on that 4th down at the end of near the end of regulation. And so at least this week, no Kyle Pitts slander. He didn't look so soft this week. He came through on that one. He did have a potential drop earlier on a 3rd down, but then Drake London came through on the subsequent 4th down in a big way. So, another thing that should be pointed out from a coaching standpoint, did the Falcons abandon the run in the second half? Seemed like they did. Bijan had a lot of success running the football in the first half, and then seemingly Zach Robinson got a little cute in the second half and kind of abandoned the run and was putting the ball in a little too much in the hands of Michael Penix, and but as far as like criticizing the coaching staff, like Zach's gonna skate by this week, for that. But certainly I think you can point the finger at him, given his sins are much lower on the totem pole than seemingly Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lakes were this week. But big performances for Kyle and Drake London. Drake London really came through on a lot of those third and fourth downs in this game, those gotta have it moments. And so nice to see that. Darnell Mooney didn't really show up until very late in the game. And so at least this week, I recall a certain daily podcaster being like, oh, Darnell Mooney's not any better than Olamide Zaccheaus. Well, at least this week that take doesn't look terrible. Gotta look at silver linings, guys. Gotta push your agendas when you can. But no, he did make two big plays at the end of the game. He had a 25-yard catch late. And then he drew the DPI that was able to set up the potential game-winning field goal for Riley Patterson that Riley Patterson did not make. So, if y'all were ready to run Younghoe Koo out of town, I don't think Riley Patterson has done enough to do that. But, so Younghoe Koo's sitting there being like, oh, no. Oh, no. Dang it. We didn't no, I don't know. I'm joking. But you got to laugh through the pain. So we will see, obviously the Falcons season is not over. They still have a chance to get to 9-8 with a win next week. They do not no longer control their destiny as far as the playoffs. For those of you that don't know how it's going to work, the Falcons have to win next week, and they need to hope that Tampa Bay loses to the New Orleans Saints. And so the fate of the Falcons 2024 playoff chances are in the New Orleans Saints hands. And so you already know how that's going to end. So no 0% chance that the Saints win next week. So understandably, it's like, well, yeah, it is what it is. So we'll see what's what next week, but at least the Falcons can say we got a winning record. That doesn't feel like much of a consolation prize given where this team was, 8 to 9 weeks ago. But Falcon's gonna Falcon. So gotta take what you can get, and we can spend the next 9 months pumping Penix, and talking about how, if only Raheem Morris could do a better job managing the game, we'd be talking about him in the playoffs. But miracles do happen in the NFL, so it's not impossible. It's still mathematically, possible, but realistically, the Saints are going to do the Falcons a solid. Yeah, sure. So we'll see on that end, guys. But tough, heartbreaking, disappointing loss. I'm not angry about it because I didn't go into this game expecting the Falcons to win. I went into it being optimistic they could win. I was hopeful that they would play a competitive game. When they got up 17-7, I was, more hopeful. But I was like, it's the Falcons, so like they're not going to make this easy. All right. So when D'Angelo had that penalty, I was like, okay, yeah, this is the Falcons we're talking about. So, obviously they had a chance to win it in the end. Unfortunately, the coach did not help them out. So we'll see. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Is basically where I'm at with this team at this point in time. So, we'll talk about it. It is what it is. You just gotta laugh through the pain, guys. I don't know what else to tell you. It is just it's like, all right, yeah, I didn't go into these final 3 games expecting the Falcons to make the playoffs, but it just to have it so tantalizingly close is why it's disappointing. It's not because it's like, oh dang it, I really thought this team, when they went to Michael Penix was going to run the table and go 3-0. It's more just like, man, we got so close. You just kind of put it, you got a whiff of it, and you're like, that was so close, So that's why it's so disappointing. So I'm gonna go cry myself to sleep later tonight. So if you need to pick me up as your first listen, continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and of course, Locked On NFL is going to have you covered with all the other action in this crazy week of Wednesday and Friday and Saturday and Thursday and Sunday football. We still got another game to go. So, close out 2024 with Locked On NFL, 2 shows daily. Find it on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.